Hit record so I won't forget 10 minutes in. All right, so why don't we get started? Welcome everybody. We're excited to have you all here. We're going to be talking about all things student loans today. So many upcoming changes to public service loan forgiveness, loan servicers changing a bunch of different things. A couple of guidelines before we start. We will be sending you the slides via PDF afterwards. So I've always hated not knowing at the end, are you going to get this? So you will have something to reference afterwards, which will be great. We're also recording this too. So if there's something that was said, you want to look back on it again, we'll have that as well. Asking questions throughout is encouraged, so you can drop that into the chat. There's also a Q&A feature. Each of them really works. We'll also carve out maybe 5 or 10 minutes at the end, depending on timing as well, to answer any of your questions as well. But there's a lot of different things we're going to go through. We anticipate this is going to be very confusing. Unfortunately, this world is super confusing. That's why I'm drinking whiskey right now, because as you all probably know, student loans suck. So anything you can do to help dampen the pain, better. But before we start, we wanted to run a quick poll. So I'm going to try to launch this now. Hopefully I don't screw it up, but a few different questions to just better understand your situation, different things in here. So I'm going to launch this. So if you don't mind taking a minute or so to answer some of these questions, so we can tailor everything that we talk about to your unique situation. Did I do that right? Is anyone getting it? Okay, we're starting to get some. As you can all tell, we don't really know what we're doing. We're kind of flying by the seat of our pants.
Thanks for throwing that out there. It gives me permission to screw up and not feel too bad about it. All right, give people a few more minutes. So it looks like a lot of people work at nonprofits. So about 60% of you are working at a nonprofit or government agency. Super helpful for us to know. Another thing too, I think everyone can maybe see the results. I'll end this so people can see it. Share results. Okay. So again, this is all anonymous. We can't see your answer. So who actually did it, but about 60% working at a nonprofit, which is awesome. About 33% no, so might be talking about loan servicer changing. We'll definitely cover that. Of only 2 people have any progress towards PSLF, and then 40% said no, and then another about 50% said you don't know how to actually confirm your progress. So that's great for us to know. Yes, number 3, I anticipated that 100%. We will talk through how you know what type of loans you actually have, because we're going to be saying different loan types and it's very confusing overall. So I'm glad we put that in there. And then a few people have a decent amount of student loans. We'll talk about why that's important overall. And about 40% have Fed loan, 20% have Navient, and about 40% have others, which is good to know. So thank you all for taking that. We'll be able to reference back that as well. Awesome. Marie, you want to go next slide? I've clicked it. Let's see if it works. Okay, there we go.
All right, so before we start, just all these disclosures is, please don't sue us. We're trying to just educate everyone, and everything that we're saying is just informational only. Everything is going to be customized to your unique situation and all these different things in here. So please don't take this and run with it, but hopefully it'll be a good starting point for you to educate yourselves, ask other experts too, to get more opinions overall. But if you've been to any financial presentation, there's always this boilerplate language, and really what it means is please don't sue us. We're just trying to do the best thing.
All right.
All right, so what we're going to go through is just a quick brief intro about us. Then we're going to talk a lot about the PSLF criteria. So PSLF stands for Public Service Loan Forgiveness. So we're going to talk about that criteria, what some of the changes are that came through the Department of Ed announced, huge news overall. We're going to talk through some examples about how you might be affected. So you're going to fall into really one of 4 camps and see which of those impacts you, some of the strategies that you might need to implement at that point. And then we're going to wrap up with things like when you're pursuing public service loan forgiveness, like what are some of those strategies you want to do? Like what are some of the things that can save you money? And then wrap up lastly with loan servicer changes and then some Q&A from there. All right, so real quick, so my name is Jake Northrup. I founded Experience Your Wealth back in 2019. So we work with travel-loving young families who don't really buy into the traditional 9-to-5 work until you're 65 concept. So most of our clients are millennials. Many have either equity compensation, over $100,000 of student loan debt, are trying to find that balance between saving for the future, paying down debt, but also experiencing life now, which is a fun balance. I'm a certified financial planner, chartered financial analyst, and certified student loan professional, which basically just means I nerd out for this stuff to try to educate people and really know my stuff so then I can help you make better decisions with your money.
And I don't have all those fancy letters behind my name, but I'm Marie Levitt, a certified financial planner. I joined Jake's firm just a couple of months ago after working mostly with retirees and people who have already spent the majority of their life working, and we're looking forward to helping them manage their money during retirement. But I am so excited to actually be working with Jake and people around our age, navigating all of the complicated money topics that you encounter throughout this stage of life. And so I'm also learning a lot through Jake. I hope this is super valuable. If I can help in any way, I will try, but Jake will be doing most of the talking during this presentation. So we're going to start off with PSLF basics and the temporary changes. So just starting with public service loan forgiveness. So the program itself was started in 2007. So if you have loans prior to 2007, and you've made payments towards those loans, they do not count for PSLF. PSLF, the way the program works, is that your entire student loan balance is forgiven on a tax-free basis after you've made 120 qualifying payments. However, the way that PSLF was written is that you have to have the right type of loans, which are direct federal loans, be on the right type of repayment plan, which the payment plans that qualified were income-based or standard repayment. And you also had to work for the right type of employer, which is a 501c3 nonprofit or government agency. And lastly, you had to provide the right type of documentation. So employment certifications, income certifications, and just a lot of documentation. So you'll see at the bottom, 99% of applications have been denied, but that's a little misleading because the reason some of these applications were denied were due to payments not being recorded correctly, employers not reporting employment timelines correctly. So it's just wildly misleading. Public service loan forgiveness, although it is complicated, can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars if done properly. I will tell you, Jake and I were reviewing this presentation and he's like, do you know what this meme is from? I'm like, I think, but if you remember from Dumb and Dumber, there is a scene when he's like, just tell me, do I have a chance? And she says like 1 in a million, but he still had a chance. So even though public service loan forgiveness is complicated, there is still a chance that you'll get there. Moving on. Okay, I'm going to go through this a little bit slowly because some of the information in this slide we're going to refer back to later on, and I'll pause for questions at the end so that way we can make sure everyone understands the basics here before we move on. Okay, so under the normal public service loan forgiveness requirements, only quote unquote direct loans were eligible for PSLF. direct loans are owned by the federal government. They were issued before July 1st of 2010 alongside FFEL loans, FEL loans, and these are Family Federal Education Loans. But FEL loans were not government loans. So if you received loans prior to July 1st of 2010, you might actually have a mixture of both. But all loans after July 1st, 2010 are direct loans. If at any point in time you had consolidated your loans, you now have a direct consolidation loan. Those are the normal public service loan forgiveness requirements. But the Department of Education recently provided some temporary changes, and we're going to talk through those next. So now, direct and FEL loans are eligible for public service loan forgiveness. Any prior payments made on a FEL loan made while working at a qualifying employer, so the 501c3 or government agency, do count towards PSLF if you complete a direct consolidation of loans by October 31st of 2022. If you already consolidated FEL loans into direct, then you will receive PSLF credit towards those loans if all the other criteria applies. Direct consolidation loans are essentially just a new loan issued to pay off your FEL loans. That's a lot of information, a lot to digest. So I'm going to pause for questions, and I'm going to go over here to the chat box really quickly.
One thing to remember too is we're sending you these slides. So you might hear something and be like, I have no idea what that means. And then you hear it a third and fourth time as we're talking, and then it starts to click. We know this is like learning a brand new language overall. So hopefully we're going to digest it in a way that's easy to understand. We'll talk through in a second too how to find out what type of loans you have and all these things. But the blue here is normal, green is changes. You want to be focusing in on the changes because those are super important. And then there's some time restrictions around that too.
Yeah, I think it's worth also just reiterating that this is temporary. Now that could change in the future, but right now this is just a temporary change that they're making to allow for prior payments to qualify towards public service loan forgiveness. Now we hope it goes forward, but it might not. All right, we don't have any other questions yet. Well, Caitlin, I'll just relay the question that Caitlin had. So why is it so difficult to attain public service loan forgiveness? And it's mostly due to all of the points we just covered. So the wrong type of payment plan, the wrong type of documentation, et cetera. So hopefully after all of this, you'll have a great understanding of what's needed and how the changes are impacting that. We have a couple more questions in the chat box, Jake. I don't know if you want to talk through it out loud.
Yep. So one person asked, my worry is that PSLF will go away. Very good question, because this has been a lot in the media quite a bit. No one can predict policy, but I think it's a very low likelihood that PSLF would go away for existing borrowers. I think you would imagine someone who's 8 years in on PSLF and then they pull the rug out of you at 2 years to go. There would be an uproar and lawsuits, and it would be a terrible legislative move overall. If there were going to be changes, I think what they would do is they would remove it going forward. So if you had loans after a certain date and you didn't already have progress, you might not be able to get it. That being said, currently with a Democratic president, Senate, House, they're trying to actually make PSLF easier. So as opposed to it being a 0 to 10 year cliff, they're talking about maybe it's a certain amount per year. So I think the risk could be if a Republican legislation comes in, but I really don't think it would be any changes to existing borrowers. It might just be from that forward, that point going forward.
Awesome.
All right, and then someone else asked that they're here for their husband. She's a great wife. That's awesome. Good for you. She said he signed up for PSLF, found out payments didn't count because he wasn't on the right type of repayment plan. We're definitely going to talk through that because one of these changes help two mistakes.
Awesome. All right. Good to move
One
on.
other person asked too, they've been on pay-as-you-earn repayment for the last few years. Does this type of repayment qualify for PSLF? Yes, it does, and we're going to talk through the types of repayment plans as well.
All right, here we go. So I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, how do you figure out what your loan type is? So here we've got just some really quick details. Again, you'll receive a copy of these slides and the instructions after the webinar, but you'll want to go to studentaid.gov, log in with your FSA ID username, email, or phone. And if you're like me, you may have to reset your password or, kind of like retrieve your username if it's been a while, or if you're not sure if you've created an account here. But once you do successfully get logged in, you will see on the home page, view details. When you get to the next page, you'll then be able to drop down next to each of the types of loans you have and see what your loan type is. All right. And how to consolidate your FFEL loans. So just to reiterate, why would you consolidate your FFEL loans? You would consolidate your FFEL loans so that way you can make them direct, so that way the temporary changes that are happening allow your prior payments to count towards PSLF. So how to consolidate your loans at studentaid.gov. You'll go into this little section down here we've highlighted for you, consolidate your loans. And then you'll just fill out the consolidation application, which will be a little bit different for everyone with some information that only you will have access to. And you'll be able to see all of your loans outlined over on the right. And I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, well, what are the risks of consolidating my loans? And Jake is going to walk us through some of the risks of consolidating.
Before I do that, one person asked, well, is PSLF, is it going to be retroactive? I've worked at a nonprofit for the past few years, but haven't submitted any documentation for PSLF yet. I've been on Nelnet and reluctant to change the Fed loans because I don't know what they are like. Great question. So it is retroactive. We're going to talk through this a little bit temporarily, right? So if you've had the wrong type of loans, which are the FFEL loans, and the wrong type of repayment plan, which we're going to talk through, they're allowing you up until October 31st of 2022 to basically say, hey, I realize I didn't get any credit previously, but credit as long as you're doing the actions that we're going to be talking through. And I promise we'll get to that and we'll identify which camp that you're in. But it is retroactive up until October 31st, 2022. So if you're working at a nonprofit, one of the hopeful takeaways that you're going to have from this is to submit something called an employment certification form, which is a form you submit, which will document all of your PSLF credit. And we'll be talking through that for sure, but it is retroactive. And that's one of the big reasons why we're having this webinar. Cool. So when it comes to consolidating your loans, remember, we're doing this because if you have FFEL loans up to this point, if you had FFEL loans, you do not qualify for PSLF. Only direct loans qualify. That's one of the big reasons why people think they get PSLF, because they work at a nonprofit, but only to realize they had the wrong type of loans. So when you think about, okay, well, if I had FFEL loans and I want to get to direct to qualify PSLF, there are some risks. And we want to go through some of those risks that might not be for everyone. The first one is related to something called interest capitalization. So you can see in the example here, let's just say you have $100,000 of student loans at 5%, and 90% of that is principal, 10% is unpaid interest. Currently, you actually only get charged that 5% interest rate on the 90,000. That 10,000 of unpaid interest, you do not pay any interest on. So it's a very unique type of debt. But if you go through with a consolidation, that interest gets capitalized. So you can see that 10,000 gets added to the 90. And then going forward, you're going to get charged interest on $100,000 instead of 90. So you can see your interest charge goes up by about 30 bucks a month. So there are some risks, right? So you're going to see your loan balance grow a little bit more. If you're just going for public service loan forgiveness, it doesn't really matter because you would have everything forgiven tax-free, right? But if you don't end up going for public service loan forgiveness, then you can find your loan balance growing a little bit more. This is why it's like a very important decision for you. If you do this, it could set you back because then you could be handcuffed by having more debt growing. But if you are happy where you're at a nonprofit, you see yourself being there, you've been there for a while, then this can save you a ton of money to do. But it does come with that risk, right? So let's just say you're at year 2, for example, and you do a direct consolidation and you have another 8 years to go. But at year 7, you're like, crap, I'm miserable now, right? You don't want to feel like you have to stay there for another 3 months forgiven. So if you're happy there, it works. I think it definitely makes sense, but it definitely comes with this risk of you could see your loan balance grow more over time. So this isn't for everyone. We're going to talk through at the end, how do you get some professional help with it? But we did want to highlight some of the risks embedded with it. All right, so that was all part of part 1, right? The right type of loan. Now we're going to the right type of repayment, which is the blue. Normal PSLF requirements means you have to be on the standard 10-year plan or something called income-based repayment plans. And those plans include things like revised pay-as-you-earn, income-based repayment, income contingent. Like, you're probably hearing that, like, what the hell does that mean? We feel the same way. It's just complicated as hell. But specifically, there's 2 plans that were excluded. This is really important. If you were on something called a graduated repayment or an extended repayment, up to this point, it meant that you don't get any progress towards PSLF because you had to be on the income-based repayment. So what the temporary changes is now, if you go to the green, it means all repayments before October 31st, 2022 are counted, right? So that means the graduated, the extended, those all count now. So if you submitted something in the past and you weren't on the right type of repayment plan, they're giving you this temporary waiver to say, hey, we recognize this system makes 0 sense. Let's make it a little bit easier for you. So that's a big, big update for you. But then at least currently going forward, after October 31st, 2022, you've got to be on an income-based repayment plan. And we'll talk through those in a sec. But there is another question we had was, what about deferment? There is something called deferment where you can just pay $0 towards your loan, like if you're in school or you have an economic. Unfortunately, currently, unless you're in the military, the deferment period does not count, right? However, since COVID happened in March 2020, all progress since then should count on an income-based repayment plan. So there's a little bit of confusion there. But just remember, if you've been paying towards your loans, you work at a nonprofit, you should be thinking, oh crap, I might have some progress now. But you want to be on that income-based repayment plan starting at the end of 2022 at the latest. Good question. So someone asked, does a teacher need to stay at the same school for 10 years or can they move schools as long as they stay public? You can go to whatever nonprofits you want. So you can go from school A to school B to school C. You can do 10 schools in 10 years. You just need to, which we'll talk about in a little bit, you have to be considered full-time. So you don't have to feel like you're at the same place. So that's super important to know. And then another question is, do I have to submit paperwork by October 31st, 2022 to qualify my payments that were under income contingent repayment? Those should already count. But if you had the wrong type of loans, if you had cell loans, then you have to do that direct consolidation. But we'll talk through a little bit later. We recommend anyway, everyone just go through and submit your employment certification. There is no downside to doing it, right? They might review it and be like, no, you don't qualify, but it's not like you get penalized or charged fees or anything like that. So we recommend just like, if you work at a nonprofit, just go to certify. We'll talk through the timing of some of that as well. And then someone asked, do I recommend paying even if it's suspended? No, because any of the payments, even right now, people have been paying $0 since March 20th, March 2020. And since March 2020 up until now, that progress should count towards public service loan forgiveness. So even if you're paying $0, it should count, which has a big impact for you. So, you know, when you're going for PSLF, the name of the game is to pay as little as possible, because then you're going to get more forgiven, which has a lot more financial savings for you overall. All right. So when it comes to repayment plans, there's 7 types. I'm definitely not going to go through all of them. The 3 main ones that you need to know. One is the standard 10-year repayment plan, which means you just pay the loans evenly over 10 years. It's often the default plan that people have when they leave school. But that can be a large amount, right? So if you have over $100,000 in student loans, like that can be a ridiculous amount. So the 2 main income-based repayment plans, one is called pay as you earn. And basically what this is, you pay about 10% of your income after a few deductions towards your loan. So it's more manageable. It's not based upon your current loan balance, it's based upon your income. And really important, we'll talk about this later, if you are married and you file taxes separately, you can exclude your spouse's income from that. We'll show you an example of it, but wanted to at least start with that, educate you about that upfront. The issue is not everyone can actually be on pay as you earn. You had to have prior to October 2007, and it's a 2-prong, and you had to borrow after October 2011. I'm going to take a sip because you're like, what the hell was that? And it's so confusing. This is why we hate student loans so much. So not everyone is actually eligible for pay as you earn, but if you are, it's certainly a good plan. Another one is called revised pay as you earn. Everybody's eligible for the more inclusive. One of the big differences is you can't exclude your spouse's income. So if you're married, and that means both of your incomes are included, which means your payment versus pay as you earn. If you file separately, your payments are only based upon your income. So it's a key difference when we talk about some of the planning strategies.
Okay, so we've talked about some different repayment plans, and now we are going to look at part 3 of the 4-part process of qualifying for PSLF. So part 3 is being employed by the right type of employer. Now, under the temporary changes that are being made, there is no change to this requirement. But in order to qualify for PSLF, you must work for a 501c3 nonprofit organization, for example, hospitals, schools, or universities, a federal, state, or local government agency, the AmeriCorps or Peace Corps. And we did have a question come through the chat that I'll probably let Jake answer, but this might answer your question. So when we look at the full-time requirement, it's a little bit different. So if your employer defines what full-time is, it could be 30 hours, 40 hours, 60 hours a week, whatever their definition of full-time is what goes here. So if your employer does not have a definition for what full-time is, then it defaults to an average of 30 hours per week. And if you're working, I know a lot of people do this, if you're working part-time at 2 different qualifying employers, the aggregate number of hours you work per week just has to average out to 30. All right. All right. Step 4, part 4, the right type of documentation. Again, there are no changes to this requirement, and Jake touched on it briefly, but some of the requirements when it comes to documentation is that you submit your employment certification form on an annual basis. And if you have not submitted this yet, with all the changes that are going on and how chaotic it's going to be, we recommend doing that as soon as possible. And we've gone ahead and included this link here for you. FedLoan is the only loan servicer who processes PSLF applications, but that is changing next year. Once you submit the right documentation, you will hear back directly from your loan servicer to confirm the number of months of PSLF that you have. We've seen it happen to where the report you get and the information you get is wrong. So it's probably a little tedious, but make sure that you double check their information against your own information to make sure that they have actually captured every month that would count towards PSLF for you. And yes, we will certainly send that link in the chat. Thank you, Jake.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to add to that too is it's not an annual requirement. So you don't have to do it annually, but our recommendation is that best practice, you do it annually. Like technically year 1 to year 10, and then submit everything year 10. But then you leave the risk of what if something was wrong during that meantime. Why most people don't get this right is they wait so long to do it. Instead, we recommend year 1, you submit it, year 2, you submit it, year 3, so you can see your PSLF credit go up, and it's no surprise. I think that's one of the big things why people shy away is people see the 99% statistic stat, and they're like, why even bother, right? But if you're actually doing it right, there's no surprise. Like your loan server is like, cool, you have 12 payments, you have this more. Next year you have 24, then you have 36. So this is why we recommend doing it annually instead of trying to wait until the end. And you can see it from that form. You just need your employer to sign off. Someone asked, did I mention that since March 2020, payments qualify for PSLF, even though they were $0? Yes, they do. As long as you weren't in deferment, if you were on any type of repayment plan, the repay, the pay as you earn, the graduate, any of that, all the payments are actually, all the time from March 2020 until now, even though you didn't pay $0 towards your loan, they count for public service loan forgiveness. It's the studentaid.gov and the federal government was super clear about that.
Awesome. We had another question come in. How should I go about submitting the employment certification forms for past employers or past years? Jake, handle that one.
Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. You just need to, you fill out the form and then you send it to them, probably via email. They're probably used to it because they've had someone do it before. They just need to sign off saying, hey, this person worked here between these dates. And as long as they're getting that, you should be in the crew. So you'll see there's instructions in this form that we put into the chat. And you can see some of that, but if you had like 3 different employers, you need all 3 employers to sign off on it. So it might be tedious up front to get some of that prior credit, but then on an ongoing basis, it can be pretty easy. And then someone said, if my income-based repayment plan determined that I owe $0 a month, do those $0 payments count towards PSLF? You're damn right they do, which is a crazy loophole. You think like, oh, I have to pay towards it. But if you're on an income-based repayment plan and the loan servicer says, hey, you owe $0, then that counts towards PSLF. Those payments, if you hit all the criteria. So you don't actually have to be paying anything. You just have to be on the right type of repayment loan, right type of loans, all these different things. Separate forms, so I want to have separate forms for different employers. I believe the answer is yes. Yeah, I would do separate forms for each employer. And someone said, with the $0 payments counting towards PSLF, if you lost your job due to COVID, they don't count during those months. Yeah, so because even though you hit other criteria, you don't have the part of working full time. So if you're working during COVID, unfortunately, the time where you weren't working there will not qualify, but the time where you're there will qualify.
Awesome questions. All right.
And by the way, we're flexible to go past 7 p.m. on the East Coast. We're going to try to wrap up by 7, but we want to be sure we're answering any questions that you have. So we're going to do our best, but just wanted to let you all know, don't feel bad about asking. We're trying to do this to educate as many people as possible. All right, so when it comes into how does this apply to you, we try to summarize it into one of 4 scenarios. You'll be able to see, okay, this is me, and then what should I be doing from that? So let's just say all these assume you're working a nonprofit. If you already have the direct loans and you're already on an income plan, you meet all the criteria already. So all you need to do is just submit the employment certification month and make sure that looks good. Now, the Department of Ed has also said if you already have documented PSLF months, there should be an automatic review of past months. So for example, down here, I put, if you had FFEL loans or the wrong type of repayment plan, Fed loans should automatically be going back and saying, hey, should they have gotten this credit before? Makes sense in practice. Practically speaking, they're probably going to F it up. So I would take it on your own to make sure you're looking at some of your payment history, make sure that they're doing the right things overall. But if you fall into this camp, there's really not much you need to do besides submitting that employment certification form and then making sure any retroactive credit is done properly. So camp 2 is, let's say you're at all direct loans, but you're not on a qualifying repayment plan. So let's just say you're on extended or graduated repayment. All you need to do is enroll in an income-based repayment plan by 10/31. All right, so then and then submit an employment certification form, and then all your past payments should become eligible, right? So whereas the last one, you're already eligible, this one, you specifically have to take action of getting onto an income-based repayment plan by that date, and we'll give you a link afterwards related to how to actually do that. Camp 3 is, let's just say you have all FFEL loans. Kind of shitty because there's a lot more work. So this one, you have to do that direct consolidation before October 31st, 2022 to get that PSLF credit. Remember, government can only grant PSLF if you have direct loans. But if you have FFEL loans, you can do that direct consolidation, which Marie explained, where you have a new loan to pay off all these old loans overall. So you have to do that. And then after you do that, that's when you can submit the employment certification form to actually document some of that credit. So I'm gonna give a real quick example because this might hone in. If you understand this, like you really get this, which is pretty impressive. Let's just say you had 120 payments working at a qualifying employer and you only had FFEL loans. That means if you did a direct consolidation before October 31st, 2022, your entire loan balance should be forgiven tax-free, right? Because you have the 120 payments. Previously, you had the wrong type of loans, but doing that consolidation made it so you have the right type of loans, and then you hit all the other criteria. So really, really powerful. But remember, there are some risks with direct consolidation, right? So there's that interest capitalization. Your loan balance is going to grow a little bit more than it did before. And then there's something called taxable loan forgiveness, which means if you make payments for 20 or 25 years on your loans and you still have a balance remaining, we've seen this a few instances. If you have $100, $200 of student loan debt, that's forgiven, but under current legislation, you owe a tax on it. So just one thing to factor in, if you have FFEL loans, you fall into this, be sure you're doing a direct consolidation as long as you're comfortable with the risks, and then do the employment certification form. And then last camp is, let's just say you have FFEL and direct loans, which can be very common. What this means is you have to do a direct consolidation of your FFEL loans only. You don't want to do your direct loans because they already qualify, and then submit your employment certification after the consolidation, right? The reason why you want to do it after is if you just have FFEL loans and then you do the employment certification, the loan service is going to look at this and be like, they have FFEL loans, they don't qualify. But if you do that and then they look, oh, they have direct loans now, you will qualify. So you want to be cognizant of that and making sure, again, any of that prior credit does count towards PSLF.
I'm going to pause for.
And someone asked a question.
Sorry,
go ahead.
I was just going to say there's a question. You go ahead.
Someone asked a question. If you lost a year working elsewhere, you can still try. I don't know if I fully understand that question. It might mean if you weren't working for a year, can you still get PSLF? You can get PSLF for the time you were working previously, but for that gap of time where you weren't working, unfortunately, you can't get PSLF credit. But if you had some before, I would still submit that employment certification form. All right, so then we're going to go into financial planning strategies. Then we're going to wrap up with the loan servicers changing, what you should do to protect yourself there. But we'll first start off of, if you're going for PSLF, there's a ton of strategies that you can implement. So the name of the game is to pay as little towards your loans as possible. Why? Because that maximizes the value of PSLF, right? And this is something that you can actually manipulate to a certain extent in a totally legal way. So most plans use something called adjusted gross income from your tax returns. That's basically like your income plus all these other things, but you can lower your income, right? So let's just say you're married, you could have one spouse use more of their take-home pay, and the other spouse can do things here like contribute to retirement accounts or health savings accounts or traditional IRAs, like all these things that will lower your income, which then in turn can lower your payments, right? Someone asked previously, does a $0 payment count towards PSLF? You're damn right it does. So if you can lower your income from a tax perspective, you can lower the amount that you pay, and that increases the value of PSLF. So here's a quick example that we did for a client. It was someone in med school. They had $415,000 of student loans, and you're like, why should I go through this hassle, right? Like, it sounds super complicated. Why is it worth the time to do it? The answer is it can save you a shit ton of money, to be honest. So here, what you can see is under revised pay as you earn, this person, $415,000 loan balance, he was paying $250 towards his loans and had it forgiven. So he pays $250, the balance is $415,000. That saves him $165,000 towards his loans, right? Very, very powerful. So this is an analysis that we've run for a few clients to show you, like, what is the dollar value of this? Like, is that worth the hassle of everything that I'm doing? You might go through that and think, no, it's not really worth it. But you also might go through it and be like, damn, that's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. And yeah, it's worth it to go through those steps.
We have a question in the chat. Jake, does submitting the employment certification form automatically transfer me over to FedLoan? If not, do I need to do anything on my end?
Good question. So it would if you qualify for PSLF. So if they look at your history and say, yes, you have documented history, your loans would transfer over to FedLoan. Now we're going to talk about this in a little bit because FedLoan just basically said, peace out. We're not servicing loans anymore for the federal government. So there might be like a time period here where you submit your employment certifications and you don't really know who's servicing your loans. But I still think it's best practice to certify. They might move to FedLoan and then they might go somewhere else. They might not even get to processing in the meantime, but the earlier that you can submit your certification, the better. But if you are granted credit, the transfer should automatically happen for you. You don't have to do anything for that.
Awesome.
Cool. And then marriage. Like, how do you think about marriage and PSLF? So if you file taxes jointly, regardless of your type of repayment plan, both spouses' income are included. However, here's the trick, is you can file taxes separately, and then you can exclude one of your spouse's incomes, the one that doesn't have the student loans, as long as you aren't on revised pay as you earn. Remember, that was a plan that included both spouses' income regardless. So there's a lot of planning strategies you can do here. If both of you have student loans, you'll see I just put in, it's complicated AF. It's so true. Like, I'm not even going to try to go in. I'm probably already losing a lot of people. But if both of you have student loans, like, you got to talk to someone, unfortunately. So here's an example. If you file taxes separately, how powerful does it actually be? So let's just say you have $100,000 student loan debt. You earn $50K, your spouse earns $150K, you have 2 kids. If you're on revised pay as you earn, you can see the calculation in here, you're paying about $1,300 a month. Just you earn it and you file taxes separately, your payment on $2 a month. This saves you $15,000 per year. And for PSLF, the name of the game is to pay as little as possible because more gets forgiven.
So something like this, it's not too complicated to do, can just save you so much money. But remember, you have to be on the right type of repayment plan to do it. If you don't qualify for pay-as-you-earn, you can also do something called income-based repayment, which is not as good as a pay-as-you-earn payment, but you can also exclude spouse's income from that too.
All right, we are getting pretty close to the end here. Hang on. So lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the loan servicer changes that are occurring. So if you have your loans with FedLoan or Navient, they have announced that they, like Jake said they're piecing out. They don't want anything to do with it anymore. So we have a couple of suggestions here for you. First, just mentally prepare for it to just be a crap show. If you're looking for information pertaining to your loans, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. We recommend downloading a full transaction history from your loan servicer. So log into FedLoan and log into Navient and download all of the correspondence you've gotten, download all of your transactions, save it to your personal files, because while they say that documentation is going to transfer to the new servicers, we know how that works. So going back up, FedLoan is changing to Jake, you can correct me if I say this wrong, Mohila, and we do not yet know who Navient is changing to. So that's kind of up in the air right now, but you've probably received email communication from these servicers letting you know that these changes are coming. So, and if you haven't received that notification, definitely want to recommend that you log into your current loan servicer and studentaid.gov, which we shared that earlier in the presentation, and make sure that your email address, your phone number, your mailing address, and all of your contact information is up to date so you get the correspondence. All right.
All right, and someone asked a question related to pay-as-you-earn versus income-based repayment. This is where it gets so freaking complicated, because there's literally a repayment plan called income-based repayment. And from that, you pay about 15% of your income versus pay-as-you-earn, you pay 10. So pay-as-you-earn is better, but not everyone qualifies for pay-as-you-earn. Remember, because there's those dates there. But revised pay-as-you-earn, both spouses' income excluded. Pay-as-you-earn and income-based, only one is excluded if you file taxes separately. Remember, so if you file joint, both spouses' income included, regardless of what type of repayment plan you have. So wrapping up with some key takeaways, and then we'll obviously try to answer as many questions as we have. So number one, visit studentaid.gov to see what type of loans you have, right? So hopefully, I know like majority of people said, how the hell am I supposed to know about the loans you have? We gave you those instructions. We'll send you the slides. So hopefully you'll be able to see, oh, I have direct loans, or oh, I have FEL loans. If you have FEL loans, you should have alarm bells going off saying I have to do something, right? Number two is submit an employment certification form or your direct consolidation by October 31st, 2022. That's the last time you can do it. But imagine all the people that are going to be doing this right now. We were literally on hold for 45 minutes talking to FedLoan with a client today. It's already a shit show. So do it as soon as possible to try to do some of these different things. Along those lines, be sure to document and monitor how much PSLF months you think. Don't take what the loan servicer says as true. Unfortunately, like we've gone to battle with loan servicers, we've had things change. Unfortunately, there's a systemic issue where they're overworked, unqualified to do things like this at such a significant level. So if they come back and say, hey, you didn't qualify, don't throw your hands up and being like, well, shit, I don't get it. Like actually look at it, call, talk to a supervisor, hire out some help, really understand why you didn't qualify or what amount of months you have. We talked about how if you are going for PSLF, the name of the game is to lower your income. There's a bunch of different strategies that you can do for sure. Related to what Marie was just talking about, make sure your contact information, your email, your phone is up to date. Get the payment history, get the correspondence. I have zero confidence that things are actually going to go smoothly to a new loan servicer. So if you're talking to a new loan servicer and you're like, hey, this person told me this, and they're like, we don't have a record, you want to be able to say, here's the actual email or letter that you got. So be sure to just like put it in a file. Hopefully you don't have to worry about it, but having that, you're going to be able to help fix some issues for sure. And then lastly is just, we'll give you some resources in a sec, just get some help too. Like sometimes you can just talk to someone objectively. Loan servicers do not act in your best interest. They literally have incentives to keep loans where you're at. Unfortunately, they're not paid a lot, so they might not be highly qualified when it comes to financial education and all these different things that we're talking about. I'm sure they're lovely people. Like we've talked to them, they're great people, but it's just a systemic issue, unfortunately.
We've got a few questions.
Okay, so we had
Go ahead.
Bunch of questions that came in. So one said, I want to make sure I understand. If my significant other is on income-driven repayment plan, we can get married and not consider my income for his payment calculations. Key reason why we haven't tied the knot. You are absolutely correct as long as you file taxes separately and you're not on revised pay-as-you-earn. So filing taxes separately, you do pay a little bit more tax in doing so. If you're working with a tax professional, they'll be able to show you like, here's separate, here's joint. But if you compare the extra tax to what you're actually saving on a student loan basis, you'll very likely come out on top of that. Someone else said, here for my fiance. I'm also guessing, I don't know if a lot of people came here from my Instagram influencer. We get her for free marketing, so that might be part of it. Does document PSLF months refer to months you worked in a job as a PSLF qualifying job? Yes. So document PSLF months means submit the emission form to ensure that you actually have that documented credit. So if you work somewhere for 2 years, you submit the form, you see you have 24 months of credit. Someone asked if I did not recertify my income for the IVR plan every time it changed. For example, I certified when unemployed and the payment was due, then started working, didn't start to, wow, this is a long one, okay. Did not recertify with my new income, so my payment stayed the same. Will my payments count? Yes. So as long as you're up to date on certifying your income, you don't have a requirement to tell the federal government, hey, my income went from 0 to 50K. You can stay on that 0 payment up until you get a notice from your loan servicer saying, hey, it's time for you to certify your income. This is actually a strategy we do often with clients, is try to keep them on the lowest repayment plan as long as possible. So super good question there. All right, so how you might go through this and you're like, nope, not touching that with a 10-foot pole. So how do you find help? I think finding a fee-only certified financial planner will be great. So they don't sell you any products. No one's a designation called Certified Student Loan Professional. Again, we'll send you all these. A student loan planner is fantastic for one-off student loan reviews. So they're not going to help you look at things like, you know, how do you talk about money with your spouse and what you do with your 401k and what you do with your stock options, but they will help you with your student loan. So great resource. It's usually like a flat dollar amount. I think I've seen between like 400 and 800 where they'll be able to help you out with that. So we have zero affiliation with them, all of them, but we haven't had conversations. We just know how it works. So they can be a great solution if you're just looking for the student loans. If you're looking for someone that's going to look at student loans and also just everything else in your financial life, investments and debt and employee benefits and your taxes, here's some great resources about how you can find help. And XY Planning Network is like all around the country versus the other two in here. If you want to work with someone locally, you can like put in your area code and see people from there. I promise this whole thing was not a shameless plug for us in any way whatsoever. We wanted to just educate people, but we're also proud of the work we do with clients, right? So if you ever felt like, hey, you guys are cool, we fall into a situation, we're interested in talking with you. As we mentioned in the beginning, like our specialty is travel-loving young families who don't really buy into that traditional 9-to-5 work until you're 65 concept. Most of our clients have either 200K of household income, they have some equity compensation, they might be a business owner, and then typically have over $100,000 of student loan debt. We're not for everyone though, so our minimum fee starts at $5,000 per year. We feel proud about that. We know the value that we get from it, that we give from that. If you find that you don't have the means for something like that, we have a bunch of people in our network that we can refer. We want to be sure that if you want help, you're finding someone that is the best fit for you and also a price point that makes sense.
And here's how you can stay in touch. So you can go to our website, either us an email. Marie's Instagram is way better than mine, just so everyone knows. She does the funny reels, so go follow her at Brew Wealth. I let my wife do all the Instagram stuff in our family. I'm not really good at it overall, but if you wanted to stay in touch with us, here's the best ways to do it overall.
And before we leave, it looks like, I think we're going to open this up for some questions. If there's any residual questions, first we have to give Roxy extra pets since you had to work late. And if you don't know, you don't follow Jake, Roxy is this super cute. She's a Shiba Inu, right? Or a mix.
Yeah, and the funny thing is too, like Kaylee doesn't walk her at night because she doesn't like the dark. So she's like outside my door right now trying to go out. But don't worry, don't feel bad. Like we'll answer some questions. But my wife is very high maintenance and she requires a lot of care and maintenance. And you can tell her I said that.
Yeah, so a couple questions are in.
So someone said on the magical day when I've reached 120 payments, only 32 to go. That's friggin' awesome. Will I still have interest or something else left to pay, or is everything truly forgiven? Everything is truly forgiven. You should receive a note, an email. I think it's either a letter or an email from FedLoan or whoever's servicing payments at that point to let you know, hey, it's done. Go celebrate as well. I mean, that's a huge, huge weight that's going to fall off your shoulders, but definitely be sure that you're certifying income each year, making sure you're doing the right thing. Don't pay more than you have to. I'd probably call like a month or two in advance too, to just confirm I's are dotted, T's are crossed, have the employment certification form ready to go. So you have confidence that everything's going to be done properly. Oh, look at that. We're like right at 7. We're happy to stay on longer though, but in case anyone has other questions. Someone said, thank you, it's our pleasure. We wish we didn't have to do this. We wish it was much more simple and not everyone had to jump through hoops, but anything that we can do to educate you more, we're more than happy to. And feel free to reach out with any questions you might have, or if you want any more resources. We'll be sending you the slides, the link, everything tomorrow. Someone, if we did have a few questions go on, someone said I jumped out late. Will this be sent as a recording? Yes, it will. Someone else said, can you go back to the slide where you can find out what kind of loan you have? Sure.
Don't get sick. Get in there.
You're welcome, Rob.
We're getting there slowly. There we go. So when you're on studentaid.gov, when you successfully get logged in, which in and of itself can be really fun to do, you'll just click on view details. And then when your loan types populate, there's these little down arrows and they're easy to miss. You'll just click those arrows and your loan type will populate there. You're welcome.
You are welcome. We'll give people a few more minutes. We're happy to answer any questions. But if not, we'll send everything to everyone tomorrow. Great. Cool. Well, thank you all for your help, for your attendance. Thank you, Marie, for your help. Hopefully this was helpful and pushing you forward towards getting those loans forgiven. So thank you all for attending and hope you all have a great night.
Bye.